welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line. My name is Bert Miller, and we're bringing conversations with masters of their profession in the world of work. And I'm very excited about my guest today. I have two guests from the C.K. Mondavi and Charles Krug Winery. We have Peter Mondavi Jr. He's the co-proprietor at Charles Krug Winery. Peter, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. We have Judd Wallenbrock, the president and CEO of C.K. Mondavi and Family. Judd, welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bert. Pleasure to be here.
No, it's great to have you guys. I do appreciate you guys come on. And who could ask for a better backdrop than the courtyard with the cabanas where the wine tasting's going on, and then where Peter's sitting in the beautiful barrel room. So beautiful backdrop. Might be one of the better backdrops I'll ever have on this show. So let's get started. I know that the Mondavi family name and Charles Krug, obviously the Mondavi name is iconic, and the brands are iconic, and that people everywhere associate them with fine wine. But most of the folks don't really realize that the two brands are interconnected. You want to talk about that a little bit, Peter?
Yeah, I'd love to, because it's very complicated, very storied history there within Napa Valley. And with reference to my family, excuse me, I think the best way to do it would be to transition into a family tree. So here's our family tree. Let me start it. So with my grandparents, they were born and raised in Italy, in the Marche region within Italy. They were married in 1908, in December of 1908. And my grandmother was 18 years old, grandfather a couple years older, all of about a third grade education, family of very modest means, kind of sharecropper things, nothing to do with the wine industry. They took their honeymoon cruise, as I say, landed in Ellis Island, very rustic accommodations on that boat down in the lower portions of it. And once they landed in December of 1908 in Ellis Island in New York, they immediately made their way to northern Minnesota to the Iron Range. So what happened there was a lot of Italian laborers working in the iron mines. My grandfather didn't like that. Started a saloon, and then with prohibition coming around in 1919, 1920s, he started a grocery store, because obviously the saloon was not legal at that point. He was dealing in fresh fruits, vegetables, so the Italian community rallied around him and said, go to California and source some wine grapes for us so we can make homemade wine during Prohibition, which was legal to produce 4 barrels worth. We have a lot more here behind me, but 4 barrels worth in a household, about 200 gallons. As long as they didn't sell it, consumed it at home, it was more or less a legal endeavor. So my grandfather did that and started it and saw the potential for this business. So my grandfather turned into quite the entrepreneur. So in 1922, the whole family moved to California, built up that grape shipping business, very, very successful, shipping grapes, primarily the northeast part of the United States where winemaking immigrants had settled. That afforded them the opportunity to buy Charles Krug Winery in 1943. By the way, a little side note, $75,000 for the 147 acres and the historic buildings that sit here, as well as the Charles Krug brand name. So wonderful investment back then. So let me step away from my family's story and go to the Charles Krug Winery story, because it's a very historic and storied winery in Napa Valley, the oldest in Napa Valley. Charles Krug, a Prussian immigrant, had nothing to do with the wine business in his home country. But he made his way to California in the mid-1800s, fell in love with vineyards and winemaking through people he'd met in the area. And then he married Carolina Bale. And why that is significant is her family was a very prominent family in Northern California. So they gave the couple a dowry of about 600 acres of land in the heart of Napa Valley. And this was in December of 1860. So Charles Krug didn't waste any time pursuing his love of winemaking and established the Charles Krug Winery the next year in 1861. So truly the forefather of the Napa Valley wine industry, and really developed it, trained a number of winemakers in the cellars here to move on and start other wineries in the Napa Valley, such as Beringer Winery, Schramsberg, and down in Livermore with the Wente Winery as well. So back to our family tree. Now, my Uncle Robert and my dad, Peter Sr., second generation here at the winery. They really refurbished the winery, built it up, reestablished it since it was shut down, as most wineries were during the Prohibition era. And then in 1966, Robert split off, my uncle, went down the road just south about 7 miles in Napa Valley and started his winery, of course, Robert Mondavi Winery. And then about a decade later, my dad acquired his ownership that he still retained in the Charles Krug Winery. So from that point forward, Charles Krug, or my dad's branch of the family, are the sole owners of Charles Krug Winery, remains that today as well. And of course, many of us have heard the story. Robert Mondavi sold the winery in 2004, so there's no family left at that winery, owned by Constellation, a very large winery based in upstate New York. So let's go to the next generation, G3, the generation I'm in. So we have Robert's kids, Tim, Marcy, Michael, who were active at the Robert Mondavi Winery. And then we have our side, my brother Mark and myself are the ones active at the Charles Krug side. And then building out the family tree into the fourth generation, Tim has his 5 kids, and then Marcy and Michael have their respective kids, some of them involved with their businesses, which we'll get into shortly. And then Mark and Janice have 4 daughters engaged in the wine business in various degrees as well. Angelina is actually the only formally trained winemaker in the 4th generation there. So she has a consulting business, did some consulting for us, and some other wine brands she deals with. Alicia actually manages some brands, some small brands. We'll get into those momentarily. Rayon is actually the only one in the 4th generation who is fully on our payroll in a sales position. Giovanna, or Gigi, actually works in a financial institution based in Boston, though involved with various activities in the winery. Our 2 kids, Lucio and Leah, are the youngest of the whole 4th generation, as I am the youngest in the 3rd generation. Our son has a couple engineering degrees from my alma mater, and he actually moved to Italy about 3 years ago and works as a vehicle dynamics engineer for an Italian auto company, but loves wine. He's visited a number of wine regions in Italy and continues to do that. Our daughter Leah just graduated about 1.5 years ago, and her love for food and wine has brought her to London, where she works for a tech startup in fresh pasta deliveries over there. So they're all kind of involved one way or another. So as we move forward, talk about Robert's family, Tim and Marcy, after they sold the winery, started Continuum, a very high-end, small Napa Valley Cabernet-based blend. Michael started Folio, an import company that imports a series of family-owned winery products in the United States, and they own some of their own as well. So now we get into the 4th generation. 2 of Tim's kids, Carlo and Dante, have Rain, a beautiful Sonoma Pinot Noir. There's some cross-pollination here with Michael's son, Robbie, and Mark and Janice's oldest daughter, Angelina, working on a small Napa Valley brand called Fourth Leaf. And then Mark and Janice's daughters have a couple small Napa Valley brands, Dark Matter and Aloft. That's the one that Angelina's the winemaker, Alicia's the manager for those. So that's a little snippet of our family tree. So hopefully that helps explain the diversity and the passion of our family in the wine business.
Well, there's certainly passion, Peter, and it seems like the Mondavi family is a bunch of underachievers. So,
Well, we're working at it.
yeah, and your son working in Italy with an Italian car maker. There's a decent amount of nice manufacturers of cars in Italy. So I'm sure he's doing quite well and enjoying himself. It always, I'll get to you in a second, Judd. I'm just going one more question with Peter. It seems that you've always been destined, obviously, to follow in the footsteps and be in the wine business, but you went and got an engineering degree from Stanford. So how did that all tie together, and how did what you learned at Stanford really now being applied in the wine business?
Well, I don't know if it was destiny or not. It wasn't explicitly stated within our family, perhaps implied. But I loved engineering. It's something I could, get through in college. So that's why I pursued engineering, and really how it's helped me in our business here is not the specific nuts and bolts that engineering may teach you, but it's the thought process, the curiosity that engages, and applying that philosophy to winemaking and the wine business as well has really helped. And then 10 years later, I took a break for an MBA, and that was great to really extract myself from a relatively confining Napa Valley, because we didn't have the internet and things like that opened up the world considerably back then. So it was a great break to kind of open up my vision on how to look at the business, and more from a strategic long-term standpoint. So that's kind of why I took that 2-year gap with business school.
Understood. Now, Judd, you have a rich history, restaurateur, a lot of years, various wineries and vineyards, and then you broke away for a moment to get your MBA and slid over to a very large CPG company, consumer packaged goods company, Nestle. What brought you back to the vineyards?
It was always in the plans. I was very fortunate to get turned on to wine at a young age. I have an older brother who was sort of my mentor or pusher, whatever you want to call him. And so my first trip to Napa Valley, I was 16 years old. I was a co-driver. It was 1974. It was my first trip to Charles Krug, for that matter. And so I don't know, somehow I developed this passion really early for wine. And my real goal out of undergraduate was to walk a mile in the shoes of everybody that touched wine. I wanted to be a retailer. I wanted to be a restaurateur. I wanted to be a sales rep. I wanted to make wine. I wanted to do all these things so that ultimately I could move to Napa Valley and run wineries, and especially run them experientially instead of hypothetically, and be able to relate to everybody in the winery because I had already done something similar to what they had done before. What I did find during this journey was that the wine industry is very, particularly at that time, was very focused on production. Like, we make great wine, and now here you, Salesforce, you go sell it. What we weren't very good at was creating the demand equation, which is really the marketing element behind it. And there was nobody really doing that very well. And that's what prompted my decision to get my MBA and work for Nestle, because it is a classic CPG firm that I think is an expert in marketing. And I learned probably the most fundamental stuff I could possibly learn. I learned from Nestle. The other part about Nestle was at the time there were 6 operating companies, and one of them was called Wine World, and it was sort of their trophy winery. Now, if you fast forward, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 sales from that time, they sold it off, and it sold off several times. It's now Treasury Estates, quite a large operation. So even when I was at Nestle, my intention was to get into the wine division of Nestle. But then I was recruited away by Peter's uncle, and I came up here in 1992 and worked for Robert Mondavi for almost 10 years.
Got it. So what's great about where you are right now and that answer is we have people in the background sitting cabanas and enjoying some great Charles Krug pizza and wine right now. So that's kind of exciting. Now, you're the CEO of Charles Krug Winery, and this show is called Beyond the Bottom Line. And it's really about the world of work, Judd. So if you think about what's going on with the pandemic, what adjustments have you made? Well, first of all, first question I want to ask you is, what keeps you coming to work every single day?
Yeah. one of the things that I was fortunate enough to do, I also went to UCLA and I played baseball, and I at a very competitive level, and I'm a very competitive person. and, and I will tell you that what keeps me coming to work every day is during the pandemic, the wine industry is used to things. We've had earthquakes, we've had 9/11, we've had economic crashes. Hell, it was illegal for 13 years. I mean, we've been through a lot. But for me, when the pandemic hit, the very first person I called was my head of sales and said, "This is the time to attack. Let's start going after market share." There's going to be a lot of people out there who's going to just sit back and say, "Well, we're going to let this all blow over." And for me, it was like, no, let's go. And it's market share, and attack. And it's actually proved to be, quite successful direction, and having a blast doing it.
No, that's great. And you talk about all the different things and events that can interrupt a business. I want to bounce back to 1943 when Peter, your grandfather purchased the winery. So the first vintage was 1944 then?
Yeah, 44, because the purchase was done in September of 43, really right in the middle of harvest, and the winery had to be refurbished. So yes, 44 is our first vintage.
And how many bottles of 1944 still floating around in this world of Charles Krug?
Well, we have about 3, I believe it is, in our family reserve vault here. Probably never to be opened.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm just an acquaintance, folks. I'm not family yet, so I've not seen those bottles yet. I'm looking forward to that at some point in time. So, as you guys know, and you both can answer this, the world of work, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of change going on. What have you guys done to pivot the business during this time?
Yeah, and I'll take that one because I sort of run all the operations, right? Really more of the business side of it. And the interesting thing about it is that first of all, we're an essential business, so we were open the whole time. We're making wine, we're selling it out there. The things that have changed a little bit, and the pivot that we had to make, is a little bit more in our direct-to-consumer side, the part that I'm at right now. Because as of March 15th, we were ordered to shut the doors by the state, and I had staff and I had sales goals, and here we are. You can't just shut the doors and say, "Well, gosh, shucks, I guess we're gonna lose money." We took that staff and we immediately turned them into other kinds of salespeople. A lot of telephone work, a lot of e-commerce, a lot of database networking, and in a miraculous opportunity, we found these new channels that we had paid attention to, but we weren't really focusing in on, and it actually compensated for the loss in the DTC. The biggest issue that we have from that direct-to-consumer DTC level is that we also do a lot of events, and those are canceled. So we did have to lose out on a lot of the events. The sales force out in the marketplace, calling on the restaurants and the retailers and things like that. The reality is that a lot of restaurants did close, and so we made an immediate change, and a lot of them are going to stay closed, unfortunately. So we made an immediate change to redirect a lot of our efforts, which is about 25% of our business went through restaurants, and we had to refocus now on going after the retail environment. Fortunately, with the pandemic, everybody did go and, quote unquote, pantry load at the grocery stores and retail stores, and we were there and ready to go and attacked with market share goals. And so we really upped the sales in that channel.
No, that's great. And so when I think about the CK Mondavi brand as well as Charles Krug, talk to me a little bit about how they interact, and obviously the sales that you need to generate from both of those brands.
Right. And we can probably both talk to this a little bit. Yeah. They're completely separate brands. They come from different areas. They're made with different grapes. They're made by different winemakers. Everything about them is different, except for in the marketplace, they are sold by the same distributors. So you've got CK Mondavi, which is what I would call the wine that we drink every day. It's the wine that we can enjoy every day. And it's a much more volume-based kind of wine. And that is the wine that turns the lights on, pays the bills for us, but also pays the bills for our distributor partners. Charles Krug is the lighthouse. It's the one that is really the flagship, and it's the image of our entire company and the 1-2 punch between those two and our other brands. So we've introduced a new brand that fits right in the middle right now called Flat Top Hills, and that's in that $15 category. Fills a hole in our portfolio and fills a hole in the portfolio of our distributors, and gives us another channel of penetration for channels to go after. And we've also made an acquisition recently with a French Blue. So we've entered into the import market as well. So yeah, they all interface, but they're really kept separately to the consumer.
No, understood. So taking that in consideration, the pandemic and the adjustments and the pivoting that you guys have made, what measures have you taken with your staff in terms of the social distancing? And I do know that you're sitting in the cabanas right now, and they're mask obviously, but help us understand how you're staying open. You have the cabanas and you have the social distancing. You continue to do business.
Right. Well, first of all, we upped our game at every level on sanitation and the practices within not just the outward facing, but the inward facing as well. Definitely, office staff is a lot of remote working. So for those that can work remotely, we encourage them to work remotely. My day is involved with exactly what we're doing right now, several Zoom meetings. So we're still together virtually. But I think it really boiled down to masks, sanitation, distancing, all the basics. Then we took it one step further when it came to the public. And with the public, people only go outdoors. They're greeted outside. Temperature is taken. They sign waivers. We have foot pedal based sanitation stations, so that you never even touch the top of your hand sanitizer. And masks are required at all times until you sit down. And all of our people are gloved and with their masks on. And the wines are actually pre-poured by one person in gloves, and then we bring out the wines in masks, so that the only people that touch the wine glass themselves is actually the consumer. So we took it up one step further than what the county and the state actually recommended we do.
Right. And so, Peter, I'd come back to you. You know, there's been earthquakes, there's been all kinds of natural disasters, and then now we have this pandemic. Beyond the natural disasters that Charles Krug has survived over and over and over for well over 100 years, obviously, what other preparedness has this taught you in moving forward? When you and the team sit in the room going forward, what has this pandemic taught you, and how would you prepare?
Yeah, first of all, we are an agriculturally based business. So with that comes its own perils that are not shared amongst a lot of other industries. So we have a lot of experience at that. So, you know, what is key within our organization is, first of all, teamwork. I mean, led by Judd, but our executive leadership team works as a team collaboratively. Communications is important. Transparency is important as well. And as Judd is the leader of this, is a very positive outlook on things and approaches are, I think, are the key factors.
That's great. So taking that into consideration, now the changes and preparing going forward, Peter and Judd, you now have situations where we have the convergence in the world of work between perm employees, FTEs, full-time employees, and contractual employees. So as you look forward, do you see any shift in the mix of your organization between perm and full-time employees versus interim going forward?
Yeah, and I'll take that one. The reality is that we still are selling wine, and so we still need to sell wine. That's what we do for a business. We grow grapes, we sell wine. But we did have to make some changes, and there were some cuts that we made. We actually tried to keep everybody on as long as we possibly could, but ultimately we've probably reduced our headcount by maybe 15%. Most of that came from the direct-to-consumer side. Why? Because we were actually closed. So there's, you didn't need as much staff. Your question is really going to, like, long-term, how does that change things?
Yeah.
The reality is we'll probably start to learn to live and continue to live leaner and meaner as a staff. And as we grow, then we'll be able to develop more and more. I don't see us going more part-time. I don't see us going more outside consultants and things like that. In fact, maybe almost the opposite, to be honest with you. I will tell you that there will be the opportunity for us to be doing remote working has actually opened up a lot of doors for us. The Napa Valley is a very small valley, right? 30 miles long, 5 miles wide. There's only a certain amount of talent base in here. When I can now hire people that have expertise that live in Oregon or Italy or whatever, Zoom and remote working opens up the doors to a talent base that's much bigger than we ever had before. So positive comes out of that.
Yeah, technology is an amazing thing, and we're learning how to use it at an accelerated pace without question. You guys are right in the middle of harvest. So when you think about the season you're in and talking about the world of work and labor of folks, what challenges are you facing right now in the season of harvest?
You want to walk through that one, Peter, or do you want me to take
it? I'll take that one. Yeah, so the challenges, every year there are challenges with harvest. Basically, about a month and a half, we bring in all the grapes for a year's supply of wine. So you can imagine how hectic it is. This year, going up to the harvest, it was a beautiful season, beautiful weather. Of course, we do have the fires that have impacted, really the West Coast and in many wine growing regions. So, the concern there, which so far we look good with the quality of the wines that are coming in, is the smoke taint issue. But we haven't experienced any of that yet. We were diligently testing for that in case there's a lot that comes through. But none of our vineyards were adjacent to any of the fires. So we're feeling very confident about our wines. The grapes that are coming in will be a great quality this year. But this year we're just being more sensitive, and the testing aspect is top of mind.
Right.
I would say prior to the pandemic, there was really a shortage of labor. Now there's no shortage of labor. I mean, I don't mean to make light of that, but there is ample selection of talent out there to pick from that didn't exist before. And one of the things that had been happening prior to this was that the hard labor, sort of the people who are actually picking and working the vineyards, things like that, that labor was getting harder and harder to find, which was prompting more and more direction towards mechanization. Something that really was not done in Napa Valley before. Now we still hand pick, but there is more mechanization that's going on that was never before, which is also prompting the invention of better and better mechanized pickers too.
Yeah, no question. And again, you're seeing automation, mechanization, technology, everything's coming into play and impacting where we go forward. Coming back to the harvest, Judd or Peter, either one of you can take this. Obviously, the last to be harvested would be the reds. And I know you said you didn't feel at this moment in time there's been any taint to the reds. Do you guys anticipate any problems, or you feel pretty good about the reds this year?
Well, it's we feel pretty good about the reds, but we're being very diligent about testing and tasting and doing small test lots as well on these wines. Remember back in 2017, we had fires that actually ringed almost virtually the entire Napa Valley. And those 2017s are being released now, and they're quite beautiful. So based on that experience, we're very hopeful for this vintage.
That's great. And so what do you guys see as we go forward for young people, those young folks that are looking to get into the wine business and continue to build this lineage, either with the family and or others that are going to school right now that would love to come out to wine country, one of the most beautiful places on earth, to get in the wine business? What do you see for young people?
Well, let me just start that off with our fourth generation. They're out of college by a couple years, but some are directly involved, some are indirectly involved with our business. And the number one thing, and that was the number one thing for myself, my brother, and really my father when he got into it way back when, is a passion for the wine business. You have to love it. It's a lifestyle business to a certain degree, and you just need to really embrace that aspect of it. There are more and more opportunities for younger people to get into. It's not just winemaking, of course, that's part of it. There's the hospitality side, there's the business side, there's this new area, really new to the wine industry, is the data analytics side of it. So there are a lot of opportunities, but currently, I must say that it's not, the wine industry is not hiring a lot of people today, but we have to look beyond this pandemic and the next few years to come. And love for Judd to maybe dig into more specifics.
Yeah, I think that it is a passion play. This is definitely an industry where you have to love what you're doing. We're not selling combs, we're selling wine, and it's something that people put in their mouths, which is pretty personal, and very subjective. So I think it's definitely a passion play. The industry fundamentally hasn't changed in 8,000 years. I mean, let's be honest. We just squish grapes, put it into a bottle, and enjoy it with food. But what has changed, I think, is and Peter touched on it, the data analytics. I think where we're getting much smarter, because remember, there's a lot of different wineries out there, and there's also a ton of wine consumers out there, but they're also drinking a lot of things. There's a share of stomach that is precious, and we need to be able to get into that share of stomach and take more than our fair share. How are we going to be able to do that? I think it's through really smart search engine optimization. I think it's really important with understanding our Google Analytics and working with people that are much better and much smarter at getting into the heart and soul and the stomach of consumers. That is more of a laser shot rather than this shotgun blast that we'd be using with traditional advertising or public relations, things like that. And I think that's where a huge opportunity comes in. And that is a transferable skill that we would love and welcome into the wine industry.
So young folks out there, Moneyball, Billy Bean and Moneyball has now entered the wine industry.
That's exactly it.
Absolutely. So before we wrap it up, I really I have to ask the question. I asked Judd before we jumped on, and so Peter, you may have to answer this one. I've had the pleasure to see the wonderful history at the Charles Krug Winery, and being the oldest winery in Napa Valley, and there is a lot of rich history. And there's so much rich history. There's this Case tractor that's sitting back over in one of the vineyards, and I'm just wondering, what year is that Case tractor?
Oh boy, I wish I could tell you exactly. I've had my eye on that Case tractor for a long time. It has to be probably out of the 30s or so. Doesn't have rubber tires, metal wheels on it.
Yeah.
And I have, in retirement times, which is going to be quite some time from now, I have my vision to refurbish that, get it running again.
That would be something, without question. Well, guys, I really have enjoyed this time with you. It's been a lot of fun. You've shared a lot of insight. And I think, if anything, people can walk away from this interview is that obviously people, caring, family, all that's important, but the way that people in Napa Valley adjust to natural disasters, pandemics, of course, agriculture, and yet they find a way to continue to keep going. So endurance and resilience, and you guys demonstrate that more than most in the world of work. So thank you for being on here, Peter.
Thank you, Bert, for the invitation.
Absolutely. And Judd, thank you as well. Really, really glad to have you on here as well and meet you today.
Thanks very much, Bert. And you know what? If I could just put in a plug, we're open for business. So
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, have a commercial.
And we are. I mean, I'm sitting out in the cabanas right now. There's a ton of people here eating pizzas and drinking wine. Don't think that because of fires or anything else that Napa Valley's closed. We're wide open and would love to see people come in. And if you can't make it out here, we're doing a ton of Zoom tastings. and we do several a week. So for companies, for individuals, for club members, everybody. So there's more than one way to enjoy our wine.
And they have multiple levels of clubs, by the way, so you can kind of pick what fits you. So, well, thank you guys very much. This is Bert Miller with Beyond the Bottom Line. Thank you.